This is the second chapter of The Squirrel and the Hanged Man, or Ratatoskr. I haven't decided which to name it. The title of the chapter is The Cost of Wisdom. He couldn't believe his eyes. This high up, he was the only living creature for an unfathomably large distance. Yes, of course, the eagle and the hawk lived above, and the stags, Dain, Dvalan, Dunir, and Durthror lived at its base, and beneath that lay Nithog, the great serpent. But to his knowledge, that was it, and Ratatoskr liked to think he knew a lot. Silently he stood, anxiety rising in the throat, like a yell attempting to claw itself up and out of him, but he just continued to stare. His little fists clenched in bowls, his tail wrapped tightly around the branch to prevent falling at this odd angle. Suddenly, something splashed against his cheek, virtually launching his body with fright from the edge of the branch back towards the safety of the ash's trunk. Clinging to the bark, he looked up and searched for the spot of white once more, but he could no longer see it. He sucked in air, waiting for his heart to slow from the sudden panic, and bringing one of his front feet slowly up to his face, he ran his paw through the slick fluid as it trickled down to his chin. Bringing it up to eye level, he saw a bright red sheen. Blood. This is blood, isn't it? He felt sick, and looked up once again through the foliage, squinting to see if he could make out the form once more, but to no avail. He clenched his jaw and tightened his grip slightly as thoughts rampaged through his mind. What's going on? How is this happening? Who was that? Is this it? Should I tell somebody? The sun coasted across the sky overhead as the squirrel thought furiously of what to do, and just as it was reaching its peak on this side of the tree, Ratatoskr slowly began to climb up towards where he had seen the spot. It was very slow going at first, sometimes taking minutes to find a new purchase for his usually rapidly moving claws. It was barely his own will driving him. It was like a compulsion, the greater good driving this small creature to investigate a completely alien view upon his sacred and everlasting home. He passed the branch that led down to his burrow, staring at it longingly for a moment, before furrowing his brow and continuing his ascent. Up and up through the foliage he traversed 1,000 times before, but now, to him, they felt unfamiliar. Pushing his face through a clump of twigs and leaves, suddenly the white spot was there again, except now it could hardly be described as a spot. It was a man, one-eyed and stern, hanged by the neck with rope from a strong branch. A spear was plunged in his side, and blood was slowly trickling down the shaft and dripping into the abyss. Is he alive? The squirrel thought to himself, and as if in response the man let out a deep exclamation, trailing off like the hissing of a snake towards the end. Stepping back to conceal himself more completely within the thicket he'd found himself in, Ratatoskr began to study the man completely. His voice had been deep, rich even, and around his neck he saw that the rope had begun to fray against his skin. The spear thrust into him was traced with elaborate carvings and beautiful depictions of animals and monsters alike. But what caught his gaze the most was the deep-set eye. In contrast to the dark, empty socket, the man's only eye was a vibrant, shocking blue, and danced about sporadically, as if it were desperately seeking something at the base of this tree. I know you, Ratatoskr said aloud, suddenly approaching the hanging body, padding along a smaller parallel branch to that of the man. You, Odin. The hiss came again. Oh, father, wisest of wanderers and grimmest of guests. Ratatoskr was now almost close enough to touch the hanging body's forehead, if he so chose. Was this done to you? It came once more, except this time it was accompanied by a stretching sound, an elongating, perhaps a ripping, Suddenly the body fell, the rope snapping loudly and sending a shock of fear through Ratatoskr. He watched the body plummet towards the swirling mists below until it was lost to his sight, and he sat there, witless in expression and limp in body. "If that was truly Odin," the squirrel said aloud, "then what is to become of things now he has fallen from the tree?" A sudden and violent shock made its way up through the tree's trunk and reverberated out to where he stood. "Something big is happening," said Ratatoskr. "If I saw this, then the eagle must have too." He cast his eyes up to the highest branches of Yggdrasil. Now a tiny squirrel narrowed his eyes and began to scamper up the great ash once more with renewed speed and vigour, this time in search of counsel from the eagle, and Zephyr, the ever-vigilant hawk, perched between its eyes.